Sir, there's nothing really wrong, but I feel very empty inside and I find it difficult to connect emotionally. Have you ever felt something like this in your life? Everything feels okay from the inside, but internally you feel a sense of numb. You feel as if you are not able to connect with people and yourself emotionally. Is this something to do with the present? Or is it something that has been building on over the years? Let us explore this in today's episode. Welcome to ATMANAM inside the therapy room. I am Stanny, a counselor and psychotherapist of over 20 years of practice. In this series, we explore real cases. We do not just present problems, but instead, we try to explore how to think as a counselor, how to see therapies in our current case, and also to go beyond symptoms to the person behind it. Because counselors do not focus on changing behaviors, but they try to understand the person behind the symptoms. This is a case of a 24-year-old working professional. Let us call her Meera. She had a stable job. She had no apparent issues as we could see, and she went about her normal routine. But she came up with a concern that was difficult to understand. She said, "I feel empty. I feel numb from within. And I even feel that I cannot recognize myself emotionally." This is not depression. This is not anxiety, but a quiet emptiness, a feeling of disconnectedness, and a strong sense of isolation. As counselors, we go about certain possibilities. Is it depression? Or is it some personality trait? Does Meera go through certain childhood memories? We do not conclude as yet, but we will keep these questions and we will test them as we go along. Meera's functioning is intact. She does not have any irrational thought process. But surely there is a deep sense of disconnect. So we explore into her early life. I asked Meera how was her childhood. Initially she said that everything was fine. But slowly, when probing, she narrated to me that her parents were working so hard. They were very loving, they were very caring, but they did not spend enough time with her. She continued to say that she would come from school to an empty house. She would eat, she would watch TV, and she went about doing things on her own. No major conflicts, no harsh experiences. But one thing that we need to realize, there was no emotional connect. Now let us pause and try to understand this scenario. What happens to a child in this given situation when she comes home alone and there's nobody to ask her how the day went, and obviously no one to connect with her emotionally? The child feels neglected. The child feels lonely, and more often the child believes that she has to take charge of her life. This might sound good and positive, but actually the child is not capable of expressing what she is going through. Instead, the child is making adaptations. Meera continued to say that she felt comfortable not talking about her emotions. She said, "I really don't know what I felt." Meera had a clear emotional disconnect with others and at some point with her own self. Over time, the child learns that my emotions are of no importance. The child even believes that if I actually express my emotion, it might be ignored. This is not a conscious decision, but this is adaptation. She also shared that there was no actual conversation that goes on within the family. Nobody validates each other regarding emotions and feelings. Therefore, Meera felt that emotions were something that has to be shunned. Culturally, we are often told to be independent and not to be dependent. But emotionally, it can lead to disconnectedness with others and with the self. Now everything makes sense. It is years of emotional loneliness. It is a disconnect that is happening deep within the person. And a thought that arises that I am okay without expressing what I feel. Now let us try to understand, how does this impact a person in adult life? When a person feels lonely while they were growing up, and when a person feels disconnected emotionally with others and with the self, the impact is not visible immediately, but over time it expresses itself subtly. Meera does not feel emotionally clear, not because she does not have emotions, but she did not have an opportunity to express her emotion or her emotions to be validated by her caregivers, namely her parents. So instead of feeling deeply, she feels alone and disconnected. There is also a chronic sense of emptiness. Though everything goes on well around her, good job, people around her where she could smile, but still she feels a sense of emptiness, a feeling of numbness that is within her, because her emotional needs were not met. When someone comes close, she does not know how to respond. She might avoid them, or she might feel embarrassed, or at one point of time, she can even feel detached, even in the midst of the relationship. Meera had learned, I have to manage everything on my own. This might sound like strength, but actually it is isolation. She struggles to feel what she needs and how she feels because they were not explored in childhood. Even in a room full of people, she feels estranged and lonely. Not because there are no people around, but she did not learn how to connect emotionally with people. So what we are seeing now is not about the current problem, but it was about the making. It is the emotional impact of being lonely for a very long time. So therapy was not about changing symptoms, but it was helping Meera to reconnect with her emotions. We took it slowly. We allowed her to identify emotions, name emotions, and then to feel emotions. This might sound very simple, but it was extremely difficult for Meera, where she said, "I don't feel anything." Therefore, we slowed it down and gradually we exposed her to identify what she was feeling. And she said, "I feel uncomfortable." That was a good start. Gradually, Meera started identifying her emotions. At one point of time, she even broke down crying. And then she realized there was something that she had bottled down for many, many years in her life. As counselors, we have to realize that every symptom does not flow from what happened. Instead, it might even come from what was missing. And that is what we discovered in Meera's case. In this case, we might also face certain challenges. Especially, there's no one coherent incident or an experience that Meera had gone through that was negative. This makes it difficult for the counselor to be patient and to journey with Meera. Secondly, the client wanted quick solutions, or the client might minimize the happenings in our life. Thirdly, reconnecting with emotions take time, and sometimes it can also be an uncomfortable process. Ask yourself, what happens to a child who goes through emotional loneliness in her childhood? How would the child process that emotion and how they impact their adult life? Why certain things that is absent also causes a negative response in adulthood? Sometimes the child does not grow with visible hurts, but emotional distance that can happen from the family can contribute to the emotional development in later life. Because of the emotional trauma of neglect, people can behave differently as they move on into adulthood. If you like this content, like, share, and subscribe. We also have personal counseling and internships for people who are interested. Kindly find details in the description. Until then, keep learning, keep growing.